to our webinar, our special webinar on using Zoom securely. I suppose we're all avid Zoom users and have been for many years here at IMS, and we wanted to come up with a webinar format where we could show you how to use Zoom properly and securely. And we've assembled a little presentation and also some we've reserved some Q&A time at the end, and I'd like to introduce you to the panel. So we've got Eric, who is Eric De Jager. He has been many years involved with Zoom, and we just wanted to, maybe Eric will tell us a little bit about his business.
Hi everyone. So as Shane said, we've been using Zoom a long time. Myself, I've been involved with Zoom since 2014, which means it's been a great journey, and we've been able to see how the product has evolved from very, very early days when we were still working on account number 181. So it's great to be part of that, and obviously it has grown exponentially. And yes, I mean, today's discussion is going to be very interesting on that topic itself, what that exponential growth has led to, and I'm looking forward to today's discussion as well.
We've also got Leo Colgan, who's a director here at IMS, and maybe just to give us a little introduction there, Leo, about what you've been using Zoom for.
Hi folks, you're all very welcome. Hopefully a lot of you guys I've been speaking to already in setting you up for Zoom. Yeah, we're trying to play our part. We've been using Zoom internally in IMS for a number of years now. We're Zoomers for life, as they say. And what we're trying to do throughout this crisis is, I guess, play our part and enable people to work from remote and see how we can help you guys as you're going through these difficult times. And yeah, that's what we're doing at the moment.
Thanks so much, Leo. So during the event, we're going to launch some questions actually, and I've just launched one now to the audience. I just hopefully you guys can see that we're getting the votes coming through. So have you used Zoom before? So just gauging the type of individuals that are viewing today. It's great. We've got nearly done. We got 70–80%, so vast majority are Zoom users. So we're under a bit of pressure today, Eric, with and guys, with this, because I think this audience is going to be quite critical. We also have Q&A. Please ask your questions during the presentations. Anything that pops into your head, we have reserved just as a timeline on this. This Leo's presentation is about 20 minutes, and then we're going to do another poll. I'm going to hear from Eric for about 15 minutes, and then we've reserved 15 minutes for Q&A, and we're just going to please push in what you've been asking. I'm actually just going to share the results there. So the vast majority obviously are Zoom users in the audience. Very good. So I will just hand over to Leo Colgan, and maybe Leo, you would share out your slides there and give everybody an update on the latest Zoom security features.
Thanks, Shane. Okay, so let's just jump right in. So what we're going to look at today is the overview of IMS and Zoom, a little bit of history. We're going to outline the recent security issues. I think it's good news that most of you are users, because we don't have to go too much into the basic features of Zoom, but we're going to look at what Zoom is and what its uses are for. We're going to highlight the enhanced privacy policy, and we're going to demonstrate some of the new security features when hosting a meeting, and demonstrate some of the advanced security features within account settings at the end as well. So
you might just share that presentation out?
Sure, yeah.
Perfect.
Okay.
That's great. Brilliant.
Great stuff. So what is Zoom? So as the poll indicates, most of you have used Zoom to some extent already. So we're just going to look at the security features of Zoom, how to get started, schedule a meeting with those new features, running a meeting, sharing content, things like that. So what is Zoom? So ideally, Zoom is used as a meeting tool, but it's taken on a whole new guise in these current circumstances. So Zoom has many functions: one-to-one meetings, staff meetings, department meetings. And in this day and age now, it's virtual coffees and family catch-ups and birthday parties. But essentially what it is a meeting tool to enable multiple people to speak, to see each other, to share content, to collaborate. And it's a tool that we've found very successful internally within IMS. That's Zoom meetings. Zoom rooms, I guess, are more along this line where you have a boardroom or a meeting room that's enabled with camera and speakers, and you can invite people into a meeting from outside. And this is an example of a Zoom room. And Zoom webinar is what we're using at the moment, where we want to present to a huge audience which is not interactive in terms of we can't see you guys, you can see us and you can see our presentation, but we can interact via polls, we can interact via questions and answers, and there's a Q&A button that you'll all see in your screen that at any time you can ask a question, and we'll try our best to answer those questions, and then we'll address those questions at the end as well. So that's what a Zoom webinar is. So you're all in a Zoom webinar right now. So why Zoom? So it's very simple. It's top of the charts. Zoom is by far and above the tool of use at the moment. It has many advantages over its competitors. I'm sure you've all used Skype at some stage and are weary from the experience. Microsoft Teams, again, you can see here is second in the charts, but Microsoft Teams has very good uses for internal communication and for file sharing and collaboration. But when it comes to video, Zoom is by far and above the easiest to use, the easiest to manage. And in certain cases now, we're looking at rolling out Zoom in schools to teach as an online teaching tool. So we're hoping that Zoom will be adopted by the schools of Ireland for the third term to teach our children. So why use Zoom? Well, we can fully integrate Teams, Zoom with Teams and Google Meet and Skype so that you're getting the benefits of multiple platforms. So it's not just dedicated, it's not just a pick Zoom and nothing else. You can fully integrate I have Zoom integrated with my Gmail. So all in all, it's a great tool for integrating with other platforms. It's an industry leader for video conferencing. Audio and video is what sets it apart. It's excellent. I'm sure you've all seen the good use of that. It's one click to join. It's very easy to join a meeting. This is crucial. It requires lower bandwidth than the other platforms. And that means that you'll have more stability and reliability. And finally, it's highly supported. The Zoom website, and Eric will take you through this as well, it has such great resource that any question you need will be answered on the Zoom website. So just the elephant in the room, I guess, is the security. And in recent days and weeks, there has been concern about the security. I'm sure you've all heard of the term Zoom bombing. And Eric, I won't go too much detail here because Eric is going to talk about this in his presentation. But there have been issues reported in the media, and I'm sure you've all heard a little bit of scaremongering going on. Just to put it in context, Zoom has grown from 10 million users to 200 plus million users in the space of 3 months. In the whole of 2019, Zoom added 1.19 million new users. In the first month of 2020, it added 2.22 million users. It's now in excess of 200 million users. So with that comes I guess, a degree of unpreparedness, and Zoom's reaction to the security issues that have been highlighted has been phenomenal, to be honest. They've acted very quickly. But we haven't really seen this sort of Zoom bombing in IMS because we had prevented these issues by enabling waiting rooms and passwords, whereas now Zoom have reacted and they've enabled by default for all new users waiting rooms and passwords. So that adds. So for those of you who don't know what what Zoom bombing or meeting hijacking is. Every Zoom meeting has a unique meeting ID, which is a 9-digit code, and people were basically putting in a 9-digit code randomly and trying to join a meeting without being invited. Waiting rooms and passwords just immediately does away with the threat of anything like that. So when you can see in this example, when I schedule a Zoom meeting, it opens up my Outlook calendar, and I have, in this case, turned on the meeting room password, and there's the password, and that's the meeting ID. So the Zoom reaction to these sort of things, well, I guess a lot of people went on to Zoom not fully understanding how to use it. So Zoom have reacted very quickly. This is the CEO, Eric Wan. He holds weekly webinars now and does live questions and answers with the audience. They've effectively addressed all the security concerns. They've changed the default settings so that now waiting rooms and passwords are enabled by default. They've changed the basic features within the meeting. They've made the meeting ID invisible to prevent any screenshot or screen grabs. They've added an additional security icon, and they've even gone to the extent of publishing a white paper on security, which you'll find, Zoom Security White Paper. It's a PDF on the Zoom website. So they have reacted extremely fast. So the Zoom actions, like the meeting host capabilities now, that they've produced some very good infographics. And again, we'll send out this presentation to all attendees, so you don't need to go into too much detail here. But they've enabled the meeting host to have the capabilities of the waiting room, enabling wait for a host to join, lock a meeting, all these sort of things that are here that you'll find when you're playing around with Zoom. We can highlight all these things that make Zoom more secure. So we're going to demonstrate some stuff, so I won't go into too much detail here. Just on the GDPR piece, on March 29, Zoom updated their privacy policy just to be more clear and transparent about what data that they collect and how it's used, that they are explicitly clarifying that they don't sell users' data, they've never sold user data in the past, and they've no intention of selling user data going forward. So they even rolled out, in particular for the likes of school settings, they rolled out administrator guides on setting up a virtual classroom, best practice, making sure that people were using the waiting room, making sure that hosts couldn't share, only hosts could share their screen, that there's invite-only meetings, locking a meeting, all the sort of stuff that makes Zoom secure and makes sure that you or your family having your get-together, there won't be any Zoom bombing or hijacking of your meeting. So let's just jump into Zoom for a bit now. We just look at some of the features. So as you'll know from the majority that using Zoom, you can work with Zoom anywhere with anyone on any device. You can start it or join a meeting from any device wherever you are, and you can share your content on any device as well. So when we're scheduling a meeting with the new security feature, this is on by default, require meeting password. You can turn that off. And once you turn it off, when you schedule one meeting, it won't ask you to submit a password again until you tick that again. So it's up to yourselves whether you want is waiting room enough or you want to also add a password. That's really a matter of how secure you want the meeting to be. I think internally in IMS, we have enabled waiting rooms so that when we send out invites, not necessarily a password is required. So it really depends. Sometimes we require a meeting password, sometimes not. Without a waiting room, I would always require a meeting password though. So when I schedule a meeting here, it by default goes to Outlook. And when I click on schedule, here I have a virtual coffee scheduled for 1:30 for myself, Shane, and Eric. And you can see here that I've put on a password just to illustrate this. It jumps me into my Outlook. I have a scheduling assistant up here. That is a plug-in from Zoom, and I can fully integrate here. And I've Shane and Eric. That's the link that they're going to get. When they click on that link, they'll be asked to put in that password. and away we go. So that's how it looks when your invitees get the invite. So starting a meeting then, I have it down here in my screen, in my Zoom screen, Leo Collins virtual coffee, meeting ID and the time. I can copy that invitation, edit it, delete it, join from another room if I'm already on a meeting. So when you've got a meeting up and running, this is the meeting screen. So you can see, I'm sure along the bottom here, you'll be mostly familiar with these, but really this is the key one that is the new addition of a security menu. And also I have breakout rooms enabled. And you might, if anyone curious about breakout rooms, please ask a question and we'll address it live or we'll address it at the end. So let's have a look. So once I'm in a meeting, this is the meeting toolbar. So you'll all be familiar with the usuals, the mute, the stop. I think these are probably the most used buttons, making sure that you can mute or unmute or stop your video or share your video. The share screen when you want to share content and record in your meeting. So these are probably the most popular buttons, but they have added here as well the security button, and they've also taken away from the top of your screen any Zoom meeting. It used to say the meeting ID, now it just says Zoom. So the removal of the meeting ID from view and the new security menu are the things you'll notice the most. So if you look at the security menu, many of you will know that from using Zoom that these features look familiar. That's because they were already settings that were in the settings menus within Zoom. What Zoom have done is they've taken them out and put them in a special security button as a reaction to the security issues. So you can lock your meeting once you're happy that everyone's in and you don't want people any more people joining, you can lock it. See the way enabled waiting room is grayed out here. That's because it's ticked and I can't change it. And that's because at company level, we've decided on our master Zoom account that every meeting in the company should have a waiting room. So we've taken away the ability to turn it on and off. If that isn't set in the advanced settings, then I can simply turn it on and off in here. And then we allow participants, these were the main concerns around security for users, that participants could share a screen and sort of hijack the meeting. Well, you have the control whether you want to allow the participants in your meeting to share the screen, whether you want to allow them to chat or to rename themselves. So for example, my name will always come up at the bottom of my meeting. If I can rename myself anything. So particularly in a school environment, I think the rename themselves, teachers didn't want kids renaming themselves, as you can imagine. So that's the new security menu. As I'm going through this, any Q&A, guys, there's a Q&A function there. Just click on the Q&A button at the bottom and type in your question and we'll address it as we go on. So these are sort of when you're setting up a meeting, particularly for teachers and for hosts of big meetings, you want to be able to manage your participants. You want to be able to use waiting rooms, your audio and video controls, and your sharing controls, so that the host or whoever owns the meeting can control. So in here, when you click on the manage participants button, you'll get these options here to invite others, to mute all, to unmute all, or additional. Wherever you see those three dots, there's additional options. And here we have mute participants on entry, which is very useful particularly if you've got a large meeting and you don't want everyone rushing in with the background noise wherever they are with the dog barking, etc. So you can click on that. You can also allow the participants to unmute themselves, allow the participants to rename themselves, play and enter and exit chime. I find this very useful, that when I'm waiting for people to join, I might be looking at something else on the screen and I get a little chime when someone is in my waiting room. The enable waiting room, again, is set by default here, and we can lock the meeting. So managing participants, this is what a waiting room looks like. So I'm in a meeting on my own and I've got Patrick here who's in my waiting room. So I can admit him, or I can remove him, or I can send him a message to say, I'm busy, just wait another 5 minutes. So here we have a meeting, there's 4 of us in here, and we've got 2 people in the waiting room. So I can admit them all, I can send them a message, or I can click on one of them and admit, and one of them and remove. So the waiting room, it's a great tool, especially when you have a meeting or a presentation and you're not ready. Just have everyone join in the meeting room one by one, and then when everyone's there, you just admit all, and they can join. So there isn't a drip and drab entry. So the audio controls then, this is probably the thing that sets Zoom apart from its competitors as well. The ability to mute everyone at the one time, or to unmute everyone at the one time. So in this example, you see everyone in the meeting is muted, bar me, the host. In this one, everyone is unmuted. And in this one here, I have a mix. So you can mute and unmute as the host individuals. You'll also notice that the cameras some of them are on and some of them are off. Okay, so we'll have a look at that. That's under video controls. And here you see, for example, Shane Dinich has his video off, so I can right click on his name and ask to start video. And he will see this screen here, start my video. The host has asked you to start your video. So you can click start my video or later. This is what I see before I asked him to start his video. Is a blank screen with just his name. So you have all those controls as the host of the meeting as well. There's also a chat function in a meeting. So here, this is a good way. The host can control the chat, can change the permissions of all within the chat, can change individually. Good place for Q&A or to instruct one person only. So in this example, I've chosen, I just want to speak to Shane Dinich, even though I can speak to anyone individually or everyone all together. I'm just choosing to speak to Shane Dinich, and he's choosing to speak back to me privately. Okay. The chat controls then. So here you can set the controls. The participant can chat with no one, host only, everyone publicly and privately. So again, really seriously good controls for when you're hosting a meeting and trying to make sure that you stay on track. You can really lock it down. And if you choose not to, I can certainly see why you'd need all these controls, particularly in a classroom environment or where you're given a presentation. But if you don't, and you actually have a collaborative meeting, the features where you can have everyone chatting in the group chat, everyone speaking, muted or unmuted, yeah, they're fantastic features to have in a meeting. So this is a typical window meeting. You're starting to see this pop up on Facebook and Instagram, people sharing all their meetings and their parties and their family birthdays, etc. In this case, everyone's muted bar 3 people, and they're the people that are speaking and presenting. So this is a typical meeting here. So again, you'll see Zoom. There's no meeting ID at the top, and then I have myself here. I'm the host, and you can see there. I have my participants window on. I have my group chat window on. There's a few people there that don't have their cameras turned on. Everyone is muted. We have a comedian up in the top right hand corner with his virtual background, and then we've just someone that's had a picture instead of for when their camera is off, they just have a picture instead of just their name. So this is a typical meeting. So then, if you're speaking primarily as the host, you can spotlight your own camera so that you're the main view, and then you have the gallery up above. And then you can rename yourself. So in this case, I've renamed myself the teacher. And what I can do here for Raymond, I can right click on Raymond, and I have various things that will that I can put him in the waiting room if he's been particularly disruptive. But you can chat to him individually. You can stop his video. You can rename him. You can make him the host if you have to leave the meeting early. You can make someone else the host so that the meeting doesn't end. You can allow them to record, and you can remove them altogether. So one of the other things, so they're the controls around a meeting. One of the other things then is the screen sharing. So just the screen sharing is probably one of the most used features within Zoom. You can share anything from your screen. You can share from any device that you're using. The most popular would be PowerPoint presentation, YouTube clips, Word documents, but you can also share out a whiteboard. You can share your iPhone, your iPad. You can pretty much share anything that you see in your screens as well, but just be sure to share the window rather than the screen if you don't want things popping up, things like that. So again, in sharing, Zoom really comes into its own. The host controls the sharing, and they can control whether one participant can share at a time, multiple participants can share simultaneously, and then if you go into the advanced share, you can do things like who can share only the host or all participants, or who can start sharing when someone else is sharing. So for example, if Jane wanted to jump across me and share something, he couldn't because I'm the host of the meeting, things like that. So again, with sharing, the host can change permissions of all, can change it individually, and the whiteboard and the iPad are great tools to be used. So just to jump into a little bit about the settings then, this is the default Zoom client that you've all downloaded and you can start your meetings from. And here you have settings, and this little button here, when you click on settings, it brings you into this window here. And this is where you would change your do things like change your virtual background. I have a few standard default Zoom backgrounds here, and then I have a few photos of my own that I can change my virtual background. As you can see, the other panelists have virtual backgrounds on. Here you can change your video, your audio, your chat settings, just a few basic things. But when you want to go into more advanced settings, then you would sign in on the web portal. And again, Eric will talk more about this. But when you sign into the web portal, you get more settings where you can change the defaults, and you have a lot more advanced settings, and you can change user management if you're hosting an account. And a lot of you guys in the audience will have been onboarded by us over the last couple of weeks, and you'll have seen this screen and where you change your advanced settings. But I'll let Eric talk a little bit more about that. So I hope you found that useful. For the moment, I'm going to hand you over to Eric, and Shane might want to do a little bit of a poll there in the meantime. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Thank you so much, Leo. Yeah, we've been banging away with a few answers there. We've got lots of questions coming through in the Q&A. I'm actually just going to fire up another poll there. So hopefully you guys can all see that poll after Leo's presentation. He's touched on some of the, I'm not sure, has that come up for everybody? Yes, we're getting some votes coming through. That's great. So great. Okay, so we've I'm going to share out these results, but quite a lot of people. We've got 34 votes so far, so keep going, guys. And I'll share out these results again, just gauging the audience. But in the meantime, while that poll is rolling, a couple of really interesting questions. Is it true that private chats are in the transcript at the end, and this is the cloud recording in Zoom? No, private chats are not recorded in the cloud recording. You know, if you can enable a separate recording of the chats, but they are just the public chats. So you can have that in a separate file if you wish, but again, private chats are not recorded. And another question then, is there a way for a host to stop a person using a virtual background? For example, if they're using an inappropriate one? Yes, you can. Again, in the meeting setup, you can disable the use for the you know, for the virtual background, the privacy background. I think the privacy backgrounds are a highly underrated security feature. Again, we're so conscious about the fact that today people, you know, are holding meetings in their own homes, you know, and you know, you're inviting your company clients, your corporate clients into your home, and nobody wants to, you know, share out what your living room looks like. And you might have a very tidy living room, by the way, or anything like that. But again, you know, a very simple thing to do is is to pop up a green screen behind you, and if you've got a laser processor in your computer, you can also you might not necessarily need a green screen. I might talk about that a little bit more in the Q&A. So again, yeah, we're seeing 60% don't have concerns, which is really heartening to be honest, because there's a lot of fake news and media going out, and I'm not at all belittling security concerns. Security is front and center for us here at IMS. Again, the 26% no time will tell. So that was really interesting. Thank you so much for that, Leo. As I say, I'm going to pop up Eric now, and Eric, you're very welcome. And maybe just to talk to us a little bit about some of the security that you guys do and implement for your customers.
Yeah. So again, before we dive into what that back end looks like, I mentioned when we started with Zoom and how it has evolved. And I mentioned that for a specific reason. I mean, 5 years, the feature of renaming yourself has been there. 5 years, other people sharing content when they want to share content has always been there. These things have always been there, but it took 5 years and one big global crisis for it to be actually highlighted, to be exposed, to show that it's something so innocent, and where people always had a corporate etiquette towards how they're using the product, they were able to, one would never thought of changing your name to some vulgar name or whatever the case would be. So again, it shows you how something that maybe could have seen as innocent and is innocent, but there's a possibility of it being compromised. And that's why, and if we start with something like Zoom bombing, for instance, and that's where Zoom bombing is all about. It is taking normal features within a normal structured call and actually manipulating that to bring a different message across, for instance. But us having a lot of corporate customers, what we've done is, with the corporate customers, we do the education with them and explain to them that it is important that you have a structured corporate account. It is so important that that all your users are being funneled into one single controlled managed portal itself. So with that, you then dictate your settings across all your users across the board. And that said, if we haven't go and look at the nitty-gritty of people that has been in a position where they got Zoom bombed, it was cases where they were acting outside of the company itself. They went quickly, boarded with their credit card. There was no IT manager to advise them to say, listen, or a service provider to advise and say, listen, I would highly recommend the following settings, or here is our company policy, and here's our settings, and this will be dictated to all our single users downwards. And sometimes we see, okay, well, I don't want this because I'm just, hindering my people from joining the session, but there's a reason why these things are there. And I think that's what's happened with the Zoom bombing itself as well. I find that, as Leo also mentioned, is that Zoom has acted very proactively, very quickly, where they were able to go out there and actually take a setting that was always there in the back end and put it front and center right there in your taskbar and say, well, now there you go. You can physically turn these settings on or off as well from the session as well. So I want to quickly share my screen with you guys, and I'm going to share and quickly just show, I just want to show everyone in the attendees that how do you actually physically get to actually your settings, or knowing how to get to settings itself as well. So obviously, I just want to go to a normal Zoom website, which is zoom.us. And if my internet allows to go quicker, you'd see it go to the page. I would then want to sign in. And as I'm signing in, this is what you want to see. You want to see that you've got this admin section here. and I want to go to my account settings. Now, again, that doesn't mean everybody that's in today's session will be able to see this. It means maybe you're just a participant, or maybe you're just part of a bigger group where there is somebody that is the custodian of your account, and he would be actually doing it. But it's relevant for you to actually go and say, right, these things are a concern. Who is this custodian? And then at the same time, to go back and say, right, what is our policies? Are we putting these settings on as well for our users? Now I'm going to pause there for 1 second. Now I'm actually going to bounce back to something else Leo has also mentioned about, and Shane also mentioned about media and stuff. I don't know if you guys have, if you can see my screen, you can see obviously I've got a little window open here that says hacking the art of exploitation. Surely that must be a concern to some of you that is part of this call as well. Why would somebody that talks about security have a window open like this? And again, I did it deliberately, obviously, to bring a certain point across, is that there's a lot of misleading information that is floating around. And there's a lot of people that is benefiting from, getting clicks to their websites to put certain certain strategic headlines to bring a certain message across. And again, for that, I say that, I strongly recommend every single organization to do their own security due diligence and to say, we're going to have to, these things are concerning. Obviously, we have to test this, but an outright do not use Zoom because I've read a few headlines is not the right way to do that, because during this time, it's a time where we have to help each other. It's a time where we have to hold hands, and we are, we are enclosed, we are in far away from our families, and we need to be able to still communicate with them. So it is crucial for us to still be able to communicate. And here's a tool that is working greatly for us. We don't obviously want to compromise that and lose that at the same time as well. So on that, I just want to bounce back again to account settings. I'm just going to give a quick overview of a few things that I would feel is, to me, that would stand out immediately to something I would want to change. And the first thing I would do is, if I'm scrolling down here as well, is something like use a personal meeting ID when scheduling a meeting. Now we've got that off, which means it's going to generate a new one every single time. We prefer that. Again, it differs from business to business. For us, obviously selling Zoom, we obviously want people to be able to get into us as quick as possible. We do have our private meetings that we host ourselves, where we have other security measures in place. But for instance, if I'm going to scroll down here, we can have always have. Okay, so there's another feature, Zoom a meeting and the topic line as well. If you're having a certain meeting that you don't want people to see, like CEO's disciplinary action or something like that, you obviously want to turn that on as well. Require a password when scheduling a new meeting. This is a very important setting as well. You can see there I'm actually turning that on now as we speak, but at the same time, on a group level, I can then turn this lock on, and the moment I turn this lock on, every single person that's going to be scheduling a meeting is going to have to comply with this. And if you then log in as a user into your settings, you'll see that you cannot change this. Instant meetings, same story. We want to require that there's a password for that as well at the same time. Require a password for your PMI as well. And also all meetings using PMI, or you can have only meetings to join before host enabled. Again, in embedded password in meeting for one-click join as well. What that allows you to do is that even though you're sharing the link with someone, you cannot basically join then the conversation. Even though you're sharing the link with them, they can press on the link, it's still going to take you to the password. But for your users that did get a proper invite, the password will be embedded there as well. And when they click on that, it'll take them instantly into that call as well. This is a new setting as well that they put there, is the requirement that you can actually now dictate how difficult certain passwords should be as well, which is also a great feature to just make it more secure as well. Mute participants on entry is a big one. We like that a lot, because a lot of times we are being confronted with customers that's never used Zoom before. So sometimes in the beginning, as newbies, they would then struggle to find out actually where the microphone is, and we'd turn it off. And all of a sudden you got all these people talking in the session as well. It is a good practice to have that. Some people then argue, okay, well, then I struggle to have my users to unmute themselves again. But remember, as a host, you can then unmute them for them as well. So this is a good feature to have on as well. Again, private chat, you can allow a lot of features that you can push downwards as well to your people. I'm not, like I said, I'm not going to go into everything, but if you really want to get to a point where, for instance, in a classroom environment or education, for instance, you want to make sure that only the host can screen share. Here is this feature for that, where you can turn that on, where only the host will be able to share their content as well. The kids in the classroom won't be able to share their content. This is a setting that you can also turn on from a high level as well. And again, you know, the setting features is going to carry on evolving. I think I'm not going to do any more on the settings itself, but just on that topic, as I said to you, you know, this has been a 5-year journey where things have evolved. It's still going to carry on evolving even more because, again, you know, one never knows that once somebody's going to compromise something else that's innocent again. And again, I think we want you guys to really post your questions out in regards to any concerns that you've got. We really ask you guys to really test anything that comes out as news in regards to security concerns. And yes, that's Shane, back to you. I don't know if you want to.
No, that's fantastic, Eric. Really, really interesting. Yeah, I mean, guys, I've been banging away some answers here in the background as Eric has been chatting. Some really good questions around.
Shane,
you know,
Shane, just before you do that, can you run that poll that you ran after after what I said, and now run it again after what Eric said, because I'd be interested to see the numbers, because certainly it's very interesting to hear. Eric has been using Zoom for so long. He knows
absolutely.
it inside out, you know.
It was really interesting. Yeah, thanks for reminding me, Leo. It was, it's great to get that audience feedback after each section here, because, you know, there is a lot of learning. There's a lot of, I mean, every day is a learning day for me. I'm picking up stuff all the time. But again, you know, really great, strong response there coming through on the I don't have concerns. I'm just looking at the results, but I'm going to share those. We just have 37 people voted so far, so need to get a couple more votes in, and we'll close off that poll in a few seconds. In the meantime, while that's running, some questions coming through. You know, is there a security concern if you don't run from one of the? Is there a security concern if you don't use waiting rooms but have a password turned on, or is it just an added security feature? And I've been answering some of this stuff in the background. Personally, I would definitely use a password for all my meetings, and I would also use the waiting room. You can go into the portal and exclude people that are part of your Zoom account from having to go through the waiting room, so that they're automatically admitted, and that's something where you can get that happy play between having to go through a waiting room, which isn't really a huge issue anyway, but your members of your company, they can bypass the meeting room. So absolutely, I would use both password, and I would set the waiting room. As well as that, I strongly recommend locking the meeting. And we had I think a question there from earlier on. Can you explain a little bit more detail around the password locking, or the locking of a meeting? Like, you know, what you can do is, when you've got everybody into your meeting, there is a little button down on the new security button. What Zoom have done in the latest version, I'd highly recommend that you download the latest version and update the latest version of Zoom. But you have that little security button. Basically, they've taken all of the security features that were previously there inside in Zoom, and they put them in one place, so you can see those and get you know, so you can, when everybody's in the meeting, you just meeting. I think Carol has asked that question, and it just means that anybody else coming along can't enter the meeting, which is just a belt and braces, particularly if you're running a meeting where you're running budgets, you're running financial material, or you're having a boardroom meeting, or your sensitive meetings. I would go that extra level. Some good questions coming through. Hi, our business team is using Microsoft Teams, or our business using Microsoft Teams for file storage and chat and sharing. How does Teams compare to Zoom as a video conferencing tool? Can I operate Zoom from within the Teams ecosystem? And how many companies use both tools? Okay, so yes, Teams, look, Zoom integrates with lots of things, right? I mean, Zoom have a little Zoom bot that you can install into your Teams environment, so that if you want to call a meeting, you just press one button, it'll generate the meeting ID, and uses the settings, by the way, that are in your Zoom account, and just automatically generates that meeting within Teams. So you can, Zoom does video spectacularly well. It's great product in that regard, and has all of these powerful features, but people are just using, sometimes they need SharePoint, they need all the other facilities that you have in Teams, and Zoom isn't trying to be Teams. It's not trying to be the Microsoft Teams platform. What it's doing is it's delivering on great video, stable and easy to use environment for the video conferencing element. I'd highly recommend between the two together, but definitely you no need to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Of course you can run Zoom on its own, but yes, and this goes for, you can integrate completely. So Teams, and Google, those environments, Slack, there are literally, I mean, there's hundreds of products, Eric, that you can integrate with, right?
Absolutely. I mean, the integration itself, not just that, also the API aspect of it. So you can have your own platform, and you're actually bringing that into that as well. So again, I mean, it's our strategy when we're going to corporate customers, for instance, is actually to say to them, listen, we're not here to try and sell you more boxes immediately. We sometimes go there, sit with the partners, and we actually listen to the customer. The customer comes back to us and they say, listen, I'm sitting with X amount of hardware, be it a Cisco, whatever the deployment for the previous 2 years. We actually say to the customer that, we've got a way here now to actually give you another financial year out of that stock, to say that, don't get rid of it. Here's another financial year, we can incorporate that, and that gives you time to choose, what are we going to do? What is our next move, basically, as well. So that's another way that there's a big embrace of existing hardware, for instance, but at the same time, when we're talking platforms as well, other platforms, for instance, where we're dialing from either H.323 SIP to them, or a native like Skype for Business, which is a federated call directly into that. So yeah.
I mean, just had a question in from Mary, how would I apply a virtual background in this webinar as a guest? Well, as a guest, Mary, this is the difference between a webinar and a meeting. We deliver this content in the format of a webinar, where it's very much the panel delivering the content out to the attendees. I could unmute a microphone if somebody wants to put up a hand and make a comment. We can bring them up and bring them on as their audio into this, but very much it's a different, webinars are different to the meetings, to standard meetings, and functions like, for example, backgrounds are switched off, unless of course we elevate you from an attendee to a panelist. Some really good questions coming through here. Can you explain with regard to encryption end to end? Look, I mean, Zoom, in fairness, hands up, Zoom the interpretation of end-to-end, or the definition of end-to-end encryption, that what we use on products such as WhatsApp, that the traffic is completely encrypted from the user's device right through to the user's device. In a video conferencing environment, Zoom is using encryption. However, Zoom also has a range of other connectors that it needs to talk to the video, such as, for example, cloud recording and other facilities like that, and also talking to the legacy systems such as Polycom, SIP, communication devices. And that is where the encryption ends, and it then becomes an unencrypted flow. So in effect, realistically, if any video conferencing platform out there engaged end-to-end encryption, the functionality would absolutely fall through the floor. You just wouldn't have the facilities that we would have inside in Zoom. And I think, to be honest, Zoom could have explained that a bit better. I don't know, Eric, what do you think about that?
Sorry, Shane, I wasn't actually listening to that. I was
Okay, I was just saying.
That's my honesty, eh?
Yeah, you know, that's good, man. That's good. I was just saying that, you know, that Zoom could have probably explained the end-to-end encryption element a bit better. I mean, there is encryption. Zoom clients do encrypt traffic between Zoom clients.
Yeah.
It's just that when you're using all these other facilities that Zoom brings to the table, such as cloud recording and other things like that, that, you know, end-to-end encryption needs to, you know, Zoom needs to be able to interact with the data. Otherwise, you just lose so much functionality that's out there. So, you know, other companies come out and say, oh, well, they don't do end-to-end encryption. Well, they're doing as much encryption as possible where without compromising on fantastic services such as, you know, their cloud recording facilities and things like that. But I think they could have explained it a bit better. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think also, you know, like you said yourself, I mean, you can only control it to a certain point. What happens from that onwards as well is you know, is a question that needs to, you know, one needs to obviously do some homework as well to actually say that, you know, if I'm going to be integrating it into my application, for instance, how far does that encryption go? How far can we take that, for instance? How do we handle that as well? So I think, again, that obviously is a, you know, open thing to discuss, because I mean there's just so many different applications out there as well. So I think it's definitely something that one needs to check. Yeah.
Well, you know, I mean, we're seeing again improvements coming through from Eric announced it as well that, you know, the encryption keys are going to be, as a new feature later on in the year, that the encryption keys are going to be, the companies and corporate environments are going to be allowed to manage those encryption keys on premise rather than have them stored in the cloud. And as you say, when a meeting ends, those keys are destroyed. But in the case of the future releases of Zoom, you know, they're going to be allowing the owners of these meetings, which is us end users, to manage those keys ourselves on premise. So again, you know, phenomenal response from Zoom. Yes, I think they should have explained it a bit better and you know, added on and padded out what, because people, you know, got the wrong, you know, and rightly so. And look, this is the thing, there's been a massive increase in number. The eyes of the world are looking at Zoom, and this is good stuff that you know, that these you know, these security systems are being scrutinized and analyzed, and some of the biggest companies in the world like HSBC and Walmart have absolutely put these things through their paces. So, you know, do I trust Zoom? Yes. Will I use the security features? Absolutely, right? And if I don't, well then, you know, if I'm going to put out a meeting ID with no password out on social media, and I'm not going to, say, for example, limit the screen share capability, you know, to the host, well, you know, I'm going to get a problem because people jump in, and next thing they're Zoom bombing, and next thing they're sharing out content. There's some other questions that are coming through. I've hopefully that's answered some of the questions. I'm getting a couple more on encryption end to end here. Yeah, there was. Let's see.
Also on that question, Shane, I mean, there's some that's a little bit more in depth. We will be reaching out to you to actually engage with you as well. There's the one, for instance, in regards to IP updates, for instance, that are sent to Jacques as well. For that instance, you know, there is a live feed that you can subscribe to, which sends you an actual SMS every time Zoom would update their IPs, for instance. So again, but again, some of these we would dive a little bit deeper in with some of the attendees as well on the, after the session as well.
Yeah, there was a question there from somebody. Is it possible to bring your whiteboard forward to edit from meeting to meeting? It's a really good question. You know, it's something, I know that you can save a whiteboard, right? And I suppose you could, you know, you could load a whiteboard as a picture and then continue to annotate maybe afterwards. But it's a really good question. I'm going to come back to you on that
Shane,
one.
if I jump in there, yes, you can shave.
Okay.
You can share a previous saved whiteboard. So there's functions in the whiteboard when you're sharing that to save and then to open a whiteboard.
Ah, cool. Okay, there you go. I didn't know that. I mean, yeah, I suppose, you know, I'm just reading some more questions. Can the recording be shared? We've got somebody. Yeah, absolutely. We're going to push out this. This is all about getting educated, you know, passing around informing everybody through information and quality information, best practice, and that's the idea behind these webinars, is that you know, it aligns as many people as possible to use Zoom and use the facilities within Zoom that, you know, that we may not know about, to make sure that we have the best security possible. So we covered off those waiting rooms, those locking, the passwords, you know, the all, and there's a range of other things within the Zoom portal. And of course, those can be enforced at a company. I think Leo mentioned in his presentation, they can be enforced at a company-wide level, which is great for system administrators to, you know, these are the things that I'm going to allow, and I'm going to make sure that all of the people that are part of my organization cannot switch these things off. Like, for example, the meeting area, which I'd highly recommend. I think it's a very elegant way to manage attendees. And of course, you know, if you're a doctor's surgery, for example, the last thing you want is to have your first patient meeting the second patient as one comes in and the other goes out. So what you do is you just hold them in the waiting room, you invite the first one into your consultation, do that meeting, and then eject them from the meeting when their consultation is over and bring in the next person. So again, building up your skill set around waiting rooms really adds a lot of very, very elegant solution around managing people into meetings.
Shane, a really good question here from Christine. Would you consider a webinar better for classroom style presentation? Really good question. I would consider meeting probably better for classroom style presentation, because you get to see, so for example, if you're the host of a meeting, you get to see all your attendees. You can also have interaction with your attendees and chat with them directly. So we've been doing a lot of webinars on Zoom for education, and definitely I would consider the meeting better than the webinar. The webinar really is for large scale presentations where there's limited interactivity between you and the audience, and people can't see each other. So for sure, webinar would probably be better for third level education, where a lecturer is trying to just deliver a lecture in that environment.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty good example. I mean, you know, the meetings have a certain function where everybody's around on the screen. You've got full bi-directional communication by default, unless of course you mute everybody and you withdraw the ability for them to unmute. So you can get quite close to a webinar. But really what you're doing in a webinar is lowering the amount of facilities available to the attendees, and in that way ensuring or lowering the attack surface effectively to your meetings, because you guys have only got a couple of buttons. You've got your chat button, which I've turned off. You've got your Q&A, and you've got your raise hand. Nobody seems to be raising their hand, actually. Was anybody brave enough to come up?
We had one.
We had someone come up, and but you know, again, what I would say is that meetings, great, no problems. Be more secure, you know, implement your security. Webinars, absolutely you need security in webinars, but you have got a less of an attack surface, and you can control the delivery much better on a webinar when it is, as Leo said, it's much more unidirectional. Of course, there are bi-directional. I can bring in the Q&A and unmute you guys if I like, but you know, so there are differences. And I think, I mean, Eric, you know, webinars, they're selling pretty good. I mean, people are more aware of what webinar is right now.
Absolutely. I think also what happened was that a lot of people were doing, for instance, they were motivational speakers, they would go to events, and all of a sudden their world was crashed with not having to be able to go to these events, for instance. So we saw a massive increase in people changing themselves, doing webinars themselves, changing from the actual conference room to creating their own virtual conference rooms, and they had to evolve, because what's nice about webinars, as an example, is that you can have entry pay plug-in with PayPal, for instance, so that you're still getting basic income, but at the same time your reach is so much more, because now all of a sudden you've got the whole world as you know, that you can actually host your webinar to, provided on what kind of licensing structure you got, from a webinar 100 all the way to a webinar 10,000, for instance. But again, you can also stream outwards as well if you wanted a live stream as well. Shane, just on that as well, I've got a question here I want to answer quickly, and that was from Tace as well in regards to encryption and the room connectors, which is your H.323 SIP for those legacy endpoints we spoke about. Interesting fact is that Zoom uses the AES-256 encryption for all chat messages, this call itself. But note that with H.323 SIP, most devices don't comply with 256, and therefore Zoom's encryption is the 128 encryption, AES-128 encryption, which is a more, let's call it an older encryption itself. But again, that is what most legacy devices still complies with, and that's why Zoom is also on the H.323 SIP connections is using that as well.
That's really good point. And I think we had a question earlier from, around session border controllers and the encryption. Again, VoIP, and we've got the Zoom phone that is launched in multiple countries around the world. Again, there are encryption standards that you can switch on the SIP side of things. I've answered that in actually one of the answers earlier. Yeah, a pretty good question there about from Dennis about a Zoom watermark on the while streaming out to YouTube. Yes, I believe you can change that. That is a function where you can edit that and put in your own watermark. So again, that's something there. If it's really useful if you've got, for example, a 500-person webinar license and you need to, you want to get out to a larger audience. Of course, you can just tick a box inside or press a button in the webinar, and it will stream directly to YouTube. And you can hit that larger audience and through the YouTube platform. So that's been that's really a really nice nice feature. So let's see. Yeah, we got does Zoom allow meetings to be transcribed and additionally listened back to as a podcast? Yes, Zoom will transcribe. It uses Otter AI, very nice company out in San Jose and in California. We met those guys at Zoomtopia last year. So Otter AI, they have their own app. Again, great pro tip: download the Otter AI app. I don't work for Otter AI, by the way, but I love that for recording meetings and transcribing. But Zoom uses that technology, so that when you do have to switch that on, guys, in the pro account, you go into your recording settings and there's a tick box to transcribe. It takes about, maybe, depending how long your meeting is, could take 15-20 minutes after your meeting, but it gives you great content of your typed out audio, remarkably accurate, but I certainly wouldn't copy and paste it into your company report or your minutes of the meeting, but without throwing your eyes over it. But really great to see that coming through. So yeah, you can listen back to the audio on a podcast. Again, you can switch on multiple files to be recorded, not just the audio transcript, but individual gallery views, the presentation view, the speaker views. You can have those extra recordings that are, Zoom records 7 files at one time, so that you can then choose that for post editing afterwards. And one of those is your audio podcast. And I love actually podcasting the audio. I think it's great that you can listen to a meeting while you're keeping your hands free and not have to watch a screen. So again, hopefully that answered the question there. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, look, it's exciting times. I mean, we're just gone 5 minutes over, so I'm probably going to wrap up. Is there any one word of wisdom, Eric, you want to drop into the question? I'm putting you on the spot with that. I mean, we're actually going to just do our one last poll. So I'm just going to push that out and we'll probably wrap this up with a word of wisdom from Eric. He's now busy searching his head right now.
No, I'm not. I'm actually going to reuse the words from Zoom CEO. Zoom is secure. Zoom is safe. And you can all feel safe that you can sleep at night using Zoom. Nothing is being hacked. Nothing's been taken away. No data is stored. None of that. And carry on using Zoom, please. I mean, it's an amazing platform, and it has changed lives. It's changed the way we do things going forward as well.
Well, that's, I mean, Leo, have you got a line that you want to end on?
Zoomers for life. But seriously, guys, what I would say is we'll address. We're out of time today now, but we will address the unanswered questions. It was great to get those questions and answers, and most of them answered live with you. Again, if you want any further information, you all know us at this stage. Just send us an email, and we'll get you sorted. There was a good question there about as an org admin, if you create a free account, can you use within your own company account, can you organize the permissions to apply to these free accounts? All these questions we can answer, so just email us, and yeah, we're there to help. And thanks for attending today.
So we got a good positive response. 84% want to learn more about Zoom. I mean, this is our first time doing these webinars in specifically around the security and new features. I certainly enjoyed it. I really had a good time chatting with everybody. Great questions in. There's obviously some really smart people in as the attendee. Fantastic to see Eric, and thank you, Leo, for the presentation. As I said, we're going to try and schedule another webinar in the short term, and you know, just again focus on Zoom's massive efforts that are coming down the track for the next 90 days. They're directing all of their firepower around the security, bringing on a lot more of the features that are already there, but making them much more default and part of the meetings, so that users aren't falling into the same repeated traps. I mean, there's hundreds of millions of people using Zoom right now, so it's so important that you know, that we make this easy to use, and they don't make those mistakes. As I say, really enjoyed it. Thank you so much. Sorry the meeting went over a couple of minutes, and you know, we'll be in touch. Bye from me.